A desert is the last place you would expect to find a river, yet beneath the endless sand, ancient engineers built vast, hidden waterways that turned barren lands into gardens. This is the story of how desert civilizations, from the Nabateans of Petra to the Persian Empire, mastered the impossible. They engineered complex aquifers without any industrial machinery, creating sustainable water systems that challenge our modern thinking. By the end, you will understand the 10 timeless principles they used to command water in a place of thirst, lessons that could reshape how we face our own global water crises today. How did they locate secret underground flows with no technology? What ingenious methods let them tunnel for miles using only simple tools? Their forgotten brilliance holds urgent secrets for our future. What do you believe is the true limit of human ingenuity when survival is at stake? A caravan moves across the Rub al-Khali, an ocean of sand where the horizon shimmers with heat. Here, a single water skin holds more value than a sack of gold, and every decision is measured against a brutal, unyielding thirst. This was the daily reality for the people who would become history's greatest water engineers. Their achievement forms a stunning paradox. In landscapes defined by an absolute scarcity of water, we find the ruins of sprawling cities, the echoes of bustling markets, and the ghosts of legendary hanging gardens. How could such vibrant life blossom in a place so hostile to it? The answer begins by understanding the desert not as an empty wasteland, but as a crucible. It forced innovation through sheer necessity. The environmental context was extreme. Scorching heat caused any surface water to vanish into the air almost as soon as it appeared. Rainfall was not just rare, it was capricious, arriving in violent, brief bursts that could carve canyons in a single afternoon before disappearing entirely. For any society hoping to take root here, relying on rivers or lakes was impossible. They were facing a fundamental hydrological crisis. Archaeologists like Dr. Tony Wilkinson point to what they call the hydraulic hypothesis. In arid regions, the organization required to manage water doesn't just support civilization, it creates it. Controlling water becomes the source of social structure, political power, and economic stability. The community that could command water commanded everything. But the problems were immense. How do you capture a flash flood that is here one moment and gone the next? How do you reach a water table that might lie dozens of feet below the burning sand? The initial spark of genius came not from complex invention, but from simple, profound observation. These early settlers noticed life persisting in certain spots. They saw patches of green where the land dipped or where the rock met the sand. These were natural seeps, places where groundwater, forced upward by hidden pressures, briefly touched the surface, creating an oasis. They also witnessed the aftermath of those sudden rains, watching how water would collect in rocky basins or flow along ancient, dry riverbeds called wadis before sinking into the earth. These observations were the first clues in a monumental puzzle. They revealed a critical truth. Water was not absent, it was merely hiding. It was a resource in motion, either racing across the surface too quickly to use or resting deep below out of reach. The failure to solve this puzzle had dire consequences. Evidence suggests that earlier settlements, reliant on simpler wells or direct rainfall, faced collapse when a prolonged drought arrived. This crisis likely served as the brutal catalyst, forcing the technological leap from simply finding water to strategically harvesting and storing it on a grand scale. So place yourself in that sun-baked landscape for a moment. Your people need a permanent home. You have seen the oasis and the destructive flash flood. What do you build first? Your survival depends on the answer. That answer began with a simple, revolutionary shift in perspective. Instead of chasing the water, they learned to make the water come to them. The true foundation of their engineering was a language written not on parchment, but on the land itself. Long before a single stone was moved, these ancient hydrologists mastered the art of seeing what was invisible to everyone else. They became fluent in a vocabulary of subtle signs, a living map of water written in the behavior of animals, the color of stone, and the posture of plants. This was the first and most critical principle, harnessing the invisible by reading the landscape's hidden water signs. Think of an expert surveyor with no tools except a lifetime of inherited wisdom. They would watch where certain birds, like sandgrouse, flew at dusk, not randomly, but in a determined line toward a particular dry valley or wadi. That flight path was a reliable arrow pointing toward a seep, a place where moisture gathered just close enough to the surface for roots or a shallow dig. They learned to read the geology underfoot. A sudden change in rock coloration, a band of darker stone, could signal a fracture line deep below, a natural pathway for groundwater to travel. They understood topography intuitively, tracing the way rainfall would flow across a vast, barren slope, predicting exactly where it would slow, pool, and sink into the earth at the base of an alluvial fan. This knowledge was deeply ecological. Ethnobotanists note how specific plants served as living indicators. A cluster of tamarisk or a lone, deep-rooted acacia tree was not just surviving, it was broadcasting a message. Its very presence declared, "Water is within reach of my roots, perhaps 10 or 20 feet down." The date palm, the iconic tree of oasis life, was perhaps the most trusted sentinel. Where it thrived, a sustainable aquifer was almost certainly present. The observation extended to the smallest creatures. Bedouin tradition speaks of finding gale or seepage by noting congregations of certain insects or the digging patterns of desert rodents, all seeking the same hidden resource. They even used their own senses in profound ways. At the coolest hour just before dawn, a surveyor might kneel and feel the soil with their hands. A spot slightly cooler and damper to the touch than the surrounding earth could indicate a capillary rise of moisture from below. This entire system of knowledge was a generational inheritance, a slow accumulation of careful watching and testing, passed from elder to apprentice. It answered the most vital question, where do we dig? But it also answered a deeper one, how much water is truly there and will it last? By interpreting these signs together, the bird flight, the plant life, the insect activity, and the feel of the land, they could make a remarkably accurate assessment of an aquifer's size and depth before any labor began. This reflective skill challenges our modern mindset. How much of our own environmental awareness have we surrendered by relying solely on the screen of a device? Their mastery of observation turned the entire desert from a threat into a text to be read, a system of clues leading to life-giving treasure. With the map complete, the next phase demanded a bold and physical ambition to not just find the water, but to intercept its very journey beneath the earth. The map was only the beginning. With the secret location of a deep aquifer now known, the challenge shifted from observation to action. How do you bring a buried river to the surface without pumps, without engines, without any power source but human ingenuity? The answer was carved into the earth itself, a masterpiece of passive engineering called the Qanat. To stand at the mouth of one is to step into a different world. The scorching desert air vanishes, replaced by a cool, damp stillness. The only sound is a quiet, persistent trickle, the sound of water flowing for miles, pulled by nothing but gravity's gentle hand. This technology, known as a foggara in North Africa, represents the second timeless principle, the art of subterranean capture. It transformed the very concept of water from a fleeting treasure into a reliable public utility. Its origins trace back over 3,000 years to the Persian highlands. a place where mountain snowmelt fed aquifers deep beneath arid plains. Someone, a nameless genius of that distant age, realized a simple, profound truth. If you cannot bring your fields to the mountain spring, you must bring the spring to your fields underground. The system's elegance is breathtaking. It begins with a mother well dug straight down, sometimes over 100 feet deep, until it strikes the water table at the base of a mountain slope. From the bottom of that well, workers began tunneling horizontally back toward their settlement, but with a crucial, barely perceptible slope. For every mile of tunnel, it might descend only a few feet, a gradient so slight it feels flat, yet it is the entire engine of the system. As historian Andrew Wilson notes, this was not just a technical feat, it was a social revolution. The Qanat democratized water access. By delivering it steadily to a central point, it created a shared resource that could be measured and divided, enabling not just survival but agricultural surplus and urban growth. The construction itself was a monumental act of faith and geometry. Teams of diggers, known as mucanis, worked in shifts in the pitch black, using hand picks and baskets. Every 100 feet or so, they dug a vertical access shaft straight up to the surface. These shafts served a triple purpose. They provided oxygen to the tunnelers far below, they allowed for the removal of excavated earth, and later they became vital maintenance points. Calculating that perfect, gentle slope was their greatest intellectual hurdle. They used astonishingly simple tools. A long, water-filled trough served as a level. A plumb bob on a string confirmed vertical lines. By sighting along marked poles from shaft to shaft, they could maintain the precise grade, ensuring the water would flow without slowing and depositing silt, or rushing so fast it eroded the tunnel walls. The social organization required was immense. Building a qanat was a community-wide investment, often taking years or decades. It demanded specialists in digging, surveying, and ventilation, and it created a new class of civic law. Elaborate codes emerged to govern water rights, dictating exactly how many hours each family could draw from the shared channel, with time measured by ancient water clocks. This was infrastructure that bound a society together, literally from the ground up. The legacy of this engineering echoes into the present. In the city of Gonabad in Iran, a qanat system first tapped nearly 2,700 years ago still flows today, its cool water nourishing gardens and homes. Can you envision the collective effort, the generations of planners and diggers who committed to a project whose full benefit they might never see? This was thinking in centuries, not seasons. The qanat is more than a water channel, it is a philosophy made of earth and stone. It demonstrates a profound partnership with natural forces, using gravity not as a power to be conquered, but as a silent, perpetual partner. It shows that sustainability is not about having more, but about losing less, guiding a precious resource with patience and precision from its hidden source to the heart of a waiting community. Yet, even this brilliant system had a vulnerability. It depended entirely on the aquifer staying full. When the rains failed for too long, the mother well could run dry. This limitation sparked another wave of innovation, leading to a third principle focused not on groundwater, but on capturing the sky itself when it finally, violently, opened up. But a qanat is only a delivery system, a pipeline. What about the source itself? The water it drew from the aquifer was often remarkably pure, clear, and cool, even in a landscape of dust and heat. This was no accident. It was the result of a third, deeply sophisticated principle, the mastery of sand and stone as a living filter. Ancient engineers did not just find groundwater, they understood how to cultivate it, shaping the very geology beneath their feet into a self-cleaning, sustainable reservoir. This begins with two invisible boundaries deep in the earth. First, there is the water table, the level below which the ground is completely saturated. Above it lies the vadose zone, a critical layer of soil and rock that is partially filled with air and water. it acts as the planet's natural filter. As rainwater percolates down through this zone, layers of sand, gravel, and porous rock strain out impurities, from silt to larger organic matter. The genius of these civilizations was their intuitive grasp of this process. They learned to identify the perfect geological strata for their purposes. Geoarchaeologists studying sites like those in the Negev Desert have found that ancient builders selected locations with specific sedimentary deposits. They sought out layers of alluvial gravel, material washed down from mountains over millennia. This gravel had high porosity, meaning it contained many tiny spaces to hold water, and high permeability, allowing that water to flow freely through it. They were, in essence, reading the Earth's history to find its best natural storage tanks. This knowledge was applied with stunning precision in structures called infiltration galleries. Unlike a qanat's mother well that taps a full aquifer, an infiltration gallery is a horizontal tunnel dug carefully into the water-bearing stratum itself, often following the contour of a hillside or riverbank. Think of it as a carefully placed straw within a giant, rocky sponge. The builders would line these tunnels with porous materials in a deliberate, graded sequence. At the outer edge, facing the water source, they might place coarse gravel to catch larger debris. Further in, layers of finer sand and clean pebbles would filter out smaller particles. This created a natural, zero-energy filtration system that delivered clean water directly into their collection channels. They also understood containment. In areas where they needed to store water, such as in cisterns or reservoirs, they would often line the walls with a layer of impermeable clay. This acted as a seal, preventing their precious resource from seeping back into the dry earth. Strategic settling basins were built along the water's path, allowing any remaining sediment to drop out of the flow before the water entered the main supply. A masterful example of this integrated thinking is found in Petra. The Nabateans did not just carve beautiful facades into rose-red sandstone, they carved a hidden water network within it. They channeled sporadic flash floods through a series of dams and diversion tunnels into massive reservoirs, but their true brilliance lay in how they managed the water once captured. They directed it through natural fissures in the sandstone, which acted as gigantic filtration beds, and into ceramic pipelines that were themselves protected by stone conduits. The entire city was engineered to collect, clean, and conserve every possible drop. This raises a profound question for our modern world. We spend immense energy pumping water from distant sources, then chemically treating it in vast plants. Their system required no external power, produced no chemical byproducts, and was maintained by the natural cycles of the earth itself. It was a model of elegant, circular efficiency. They were not fighting their environment, they were collaborating with its deepest processes, using the planet's own geology as both warehouse and purification plant. Yet, even the most perfect filter and the most reliable spring are useless if the water simply vanishes when you need it most. This vulnerability led to perhaps their most ambitious and visually stunning innovation, the art of defying evaporation in a world defined by it. Petra's famous treasury facade is not the city's true masterpiece. That honor belongs to the silent, intricate network of channels carved into the very stone that surrounds it. The Nabateans did not just build a city in the desert, they engineered an entire hydrological landscape, turning a seasonal flood zone into a permanent oasis. Their wealth, as archaeologist Dr. Susan Alcock notes, was not merely from controlling the spice trade routes, but from controlling the water that made life on those routes possible. Their challenge was uniquely daunting. Petra sits within a deep canyon or sick, surrounded by high, barren plateaus. Rainfall on those plateaus was rare, but when it came, it arrived with catastrophic force, funneling into the canyon as devastating flash floods. The Nabatean solution was not to resist this water, but to orchestrate its every move. they built a comprehensive, multi-layered system that acted like a giant stone lung, inhaling the floodwaters and exhaling a steady, life-giving supply. Their work began high on the surrounding cliffs. A network of over 200 small dams and diversion walls intercepted runoff before it could gather destructive speed. These structures, often simple but precisely placed, channeled water into a series of carved conduits that lined the canyon walls. You can still see them today, shallow grooves running alongside the main sick path, sometimes switching from one side of the gorge to the other on elegant stone aqueduct bridges. This was gravity-fed engineering at its most confident. The water was then directed into massive, strategically placed reservoirs. The Al-Madros Reservoir, hewn from solid rock, could hold over 1.5 million gallons. Another, fed by the famous Turkmeniye Dam, secured the city's northern approach, but their genius extended beyond collection to purification and prevention. They understood that a flood brings not just water, but also tons of silt and debris that could choke their channels and bury their city. To solve this, they constructed a series of settling basins and spillways. The water would be slowed in these basins, allowing sediment to drop out before the cleaner overflow continued into the storage system. Perhaps their most sophisticated feat was preventing the silting of the main Sik itself, the city's vital artery. They engineered a bypass tunnel, diverting the most violent floodwaters around the entrance gorge entirely. This protected the paved road and the delicate water channels from being scoured away or buried. Later Roman occupants, who valued monumental arches over this subtle hydrology, allowed the system to fall into disrepair. The result was catastrophic. The Sik filled with sediment, the channels clogged, and the managed water cycle broke down. This offers a profound lesson in environmental fragility. The Nabateans thrived because they saw themselves as part of a system, carefully balancing intake, storage, and flow. When that balance was disrupted, the city's vulnerability was laid bare. Their legacy asks us a reflective question. In our own engineered environments, from sprawling cities to agricultural regions, are we building elaborate facades while neglecting the essential, hidden networks that truly sustain us? The Nabateans mastered the desert by listening to its rhythms and redirecting its fury with graceful precision. Yet, even their brilliant containment had a counterpart, a different philosophy practiced in another desert empire that focused not on control, but on widespread, democratic distribution. Alexander the Great's weary soldiers marching through the arid plains of Persia must have blinked in disbelief. Ahead, behind high walls, lay a vision of impossible green, a garden of flowering trees and cool, murmuring streams. This was not a mirage, but a paradisa, a walled paradise made real in the desert. Its existence spoke of an empire built not on conquest alone, but on a profound mastery of the unseen. For the Persians, the qanat was far more than a clever irrigation tool. It was the very circulatory system of their civilization, a technology that nurtured both gardens and imperial power on a breathtaking scale. The numbers defy belief. At its zenith, the Persian Empire was threaded with tens of thousands of these subterranean channels. Some individual qanats stretched for over 50 kilometers, a distance that would take a full day to walk, all painstakingly carved by hand through rock and soil. This was infrastructure on a staggering, state-sponsored level. To manage such a vast and vital network required a new kind of bureaucracy. Historical texts describe the mir-ab, the royal inspector of waters, a high-ranking official whose authority rivaled that of a general. The mir-ab oversaw the construction of new qanats, mediated disputes, and enforced a complex body of law governing every drop. Water shares were not allocated by volume but by time. A farmer's right might be 2 hours of flow every 12 days, measured by ancient water clocks watched with solemn intensity. This system created a society deeply bound by mutual dependence and strict regulation. The qanats' gift was the paradise garden, but this was no simple pleasure ground. It was a feat of microclimate engineering. By bringing a steady, cool stream into a walled enclosure, the Persians created a self-reinforcing ecological bubble. The water fed the plants provided shade and released moisture into the air, which further cooled the environment, allowing even more delicate species to thrive. These gardens were living symbols of the king's power to impose order on chaos, to create fertile peace within a realm of harshness. They were the ultimate display of control over the most precious resource. The engineering genius extended to preservation. In cities like Yazd, Qanat water was channeled to fuel another marvel, the Yakchul or ice pit. These were massive, domed structures with underground storage spaces. By directing the Qanat's cool air and water into them, often enhanced by clever wind catchers, engineers could produce and store ice even in the height of summer. This allowed for the preservation of food and the creation of chilled delicacies, a luxury that spoke of advanced, almost modern, control over the environment. The city of Yazd itself stands as a monument to this hydraulic civilization. Its survival for millennia in the heart of the Iranian desert earned its Qanat system a designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city is a testament to a symbiotic relationship where the community maintained the hidden waterways, and the waterways, in turn, sustained every aspect of urban life, from the public baths to the quiet courtyards of its homes. This brings us to a reflective and complex question. How did a technology that demanded such profound community cooperation also become a powerful tool for reinforcing social hierarchy and imperial control? The answer lies in the nature of the resource itself. The mir-ab and his legal codes centralized authority. The allocation of water time created clear social and economic tiers, those with prime shares and those with lesser. The state's role in financing and protecting the larger qanats tied regional prosperity directly to the stability of the central government. The Paradise Garden was not a public park, it was a royal enclosure, a physical manifestation of the privilege that controlled water could bestow. The Persian model reveals a timeless truth. Water engineering does not just shape landscapes, it shapes societies. It can foster collective effort and breathtaking beauty, while simultaneously weaving an invisible architecture of power and control. This delicate balance between communal survival and centralized authority presents an enduring puzzle. What happens when the system faces a threat it cannot channel or control? This question leads us from the managed gardens of Persia to a civilization that faced a challenge of a different, more enigmatic scale. A society that thrived in a desert so dry it seemed to defy the very laws of nature, only to leave behind whispers of a sudden, mysterious departure. The Persian model reveals how water can centralize power, but in the vastness of the Algerian Sahara, the same technology forged a different path, one of profound communal harmony. Here, beneath the endless dunes, the foggara system did more than deliver water, it wove the very fabric of society. In oasis towns like Gardaya, established over 1,000 years ago by the Ibadite Mozabites, the foggara was the beating heart of a unique and resilient civilization. For them, engineering was not separate from faith or social order, it was their expression. Their entire settlement pattern, with concentric rings of gardens, homes, and fortified granaries radiating from the central water source, was a physical manifestation of a deeply held belief in equality, modesty, and collective survival. The water from the foggara was not a commodity to be owned by a few, but a sacred trust to be shared by all. This created a social model where technology and morality were inseparable. Expert research into their legal codes shows that water rights were intrinsically tied to land ownership in the Pomerania, the date palm gardens. Owning a plot of land came with a precise, inherited share of water time, measured not in volume but in the careful turning of a water clock, a clepsydra, at the distribution basin. This share could be sold or inherited, but it always carried with it a non-negotiable duty, the responsibility to participate in the maintenance of the communal system. The technical challenges here were distinct from the rocky highlands of Persia. The Saharan soil was often loose sand, prone to collapse. The Mozabite engineers adapted brilliantly. They reinforced their underground tunnels with baked clay rings or durable palm wood, creating stable conduits that could withstand the shifting pressures. They also developed specific maintenance rituals that aligned with the environment. Digging and cleaning were often conducted in the cooler winter months, and the work followed a precise, rotating schedule that involved every shareholder. A beautiful example of this living system continues in the Oasis of Timmerman. There, the maintenance of the foggara is a weekly communal duty. Each shareholder knows their appointed day and time to descend into the specific access shaft for their section, to clear silt and repair walls. This is not a chore imposed by an authority, but a sacred civic obligation, a direct personal investment in the survival of the whole community. This was managed by a respected, specialized class of well diggers, the muqani, who possessed the dangerous, secret knowledge of tunneling in unstable ground. Their work was guided by complex mathematics, calculating slopes and dividing water shares with a fairness that prevented conflict. The system created a remarkable social equilibrium. Because water access was so directly linked to communal labor, extreme wealth disparity was naturally checked. A person could not amass large water shares without also taking on a proportionately large share of the physical upkeep, a powerful built-in disincentive against hoarding. This raises a poignant question for our modern context. In an age of individual water meters and privatized utilities, where our relationship to water is often a distant monthly bill, what have we lost by severing that direct link between resource, responsibility, and community? The foggara of the Sahara demonstrates that the most sustainable engineering is not just about moving water, it is about moving people, aligning individual interest with collective survival through shared ritual and mutual care. It presents a vision of technology not as a tool of control, but as a covenant, a physical agreement etched into the earth that binds a society together. Yet, even the most harmonious system exists within a larger, unpredictable world, and the ultimate test for any desert civilization was not a social one, but an environmental one when the climate itself began to shift. The Sahara's foggara revealed how water could weave a community together, but far to the east, on the rocky peninsula of Oman, an even more ancient system turned entire mountains into clocks. Here, the rhythm of life was not measured by the sun alone, but by the steady, timed flow of water through channels known as Aflaj. These intricate networks, some dating back over 2,500 years to the region's Iron Age, did more than irrigate crops, they engineered entire oasis states from the ground up. The word Falaj itself means to divide or share, a perfect description of a technology that was as much about social order as it was about hydrology. Their most legendary achievement was sustaining the fabled city of Ubar, a hub of the frankincense trade that thrived in the heart of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. Ubar's wealth was built not on gold, but on its mastery of hidden water, channeling it through Aflaj to create a green haven in the world's most unforgiving sand sea. Omani heritage experts classify these systems by their source, revealing a precise understanding of the water cycle. The Gali Aflaj captured surface flow from seasonal floods. The Aini channels tapped directly from spring heads, but the most sophisticated were the Dori Aflaj, marvels of subterranean engineering nearly identical to the Persian Qanat. Teams of diggers would tunnel for miles from an underground water source in the foothills, maintaining that critical, gentle slope to guide water by gravity to the arid plains below. The true genius of the Aflaj, however, lay above ground in the meticulous legal framework that governed every drop. Centuries-old manuscripts detail a complex code of water rights, administered by a respected official known as the Arif. The Arif was not a ruler but a guardian of time. Using ancient sundials or star charts, he would measure and allocate water shares to each family in the community. A farmer's share was not a volume of water, but a specific window of time, perhaps 2 hours every 8 days, during which the full flow of the Aflaj would be diverted to his plot. This created a powerful, self-enforcing system of fairness. Since everyone's turn was public, transparent, and governed by the immutable movement of the sun, hoarding was impossible and conflict was minimized. The system demanded constant, shared maintenance, with each shareholder responsible for cleaning and repairing the section of the channel that corresponded to their water time. You can witness this living history at Falaj al-Qatmin in Birkat al-Muz, a doughty Aflaj that has flowed continuously for well over 1,000 years. Standing at its central distribution point, you see not just water but a liquid expression of time and community. The reflective question this raises is profound. In a world of increasing scarcity, does a system based on shared time rather than private ownership hold a key to lasting peace? The Aflaj system represents a triumph of legal imagination, proving that the most vital engineering is often the architecture of agreement itself. Yet, even the most perfectly managed channel is only as reliable as the source that feeds it. And when that source begins to fade, the entire civilization it supports faces a silent, creeping test. The silent mathematics governing these waterways was as vital as the water itself. Beneath the surface of every successful qanat, Aflaj, and aqueduct lay a hidden world of precise calculation, a fourth principle of engineering that mastered gravity, gradient, and measurement with astonishingly simple tools. The central challenge was deceptively complex. Water is a powerful but fickle partner. Channel it with too steep a slope, and it gains destructive speed, scouring away the carefully carved tunnel walls, turning the lifeline into an agent of its own collapse. Yet, make the slope too gentle and the water loses momentum, slowing to a stagnant trickle where silt settles, choking the passage. The optimal gradient, often less than 1 degree of decline, had to be maintained over miles of darkness, using nothing but human intuition and basic geometry. How did they achieve such precision? The answer lies in a profound, intuitive grasp of physics. Long before it was formally defined, they understood hydraulic head, the potential energy stored in water at a height. They knew that this energy, converted to motion by gravity, was what drove the flow. Their task was to harness just enough of it to keep the water moving smoothly, without unleashing its full erosive force. Ancient texts like those of Roman surveyors describe the tools that made this possible. One of the most elegant was the chorobates, a long, leveled wooden bench with a central groove. By filling that groove with water and observing its surface, engineers could establish a true horizontal line across uneven terrain. Simpler versions used a water-filled trench or a basic frame with a plumb line. For alignment over long distances, they used the groma, a cross-shaped instrument with hanging weights that allowed them to sight straight lines and right angles from shaft to shaft. Their units of measurement were rooted in the human body, a cubit being the length from elbow to fingertip, a foot speaking for itself. This created a consistent, relatable scale that every worker could understand. The process was one of patient iteration. From the mother well, surveyors would mark the desired outlet point in the distance. Using their sighting tools and marked poles, they would work backwards, calculating the necessary drop over the known distance. They would then physically test their calculations by digging a short pilot tunnel, observing the water's behavior, and making minute adjustments before committing to the full, years-long excavation. The proof of their skill is etched into the landscape. In Iran, some qanat chains maintain a near-perfect, consistent gradient for over 30 miles, a surveying feat that would be impressive even with modern laser levels. Consider the mental leap this required. They were not just digging a hole, they were solving a dynamic equation in their minds, balancing distance, drop, and the water's own behavior, all without a single written formula or digital model. It forces a reflective question upon us. In an age of instant computer simulation, have we lost the intimate, tactile understanding of the materials and forces we work with? Their mathematics was silent, written not on parchment but in the enduring flow of water through stone. This precise control of current was the hidden engine, but it was only half of the story. To truly build a civilization in the desert, they needed to solve an even more relentless problem: the constant, thirsty gaze of the sun. The perfect slope of a qanat is meaningless if the tunnel itself crumbles within a generation. Engineering against the desert demanded more than clever gradients. It required a fifth principle, a philosophy of endurance built into every material choice and ritual. Durability was not an accident, it was a deliberate covenant with the future, achieved through meticulous design and perpetual care. To understand it, feel the cool, glassy surface of a Nabatean ceramic pipe, kiln-fired to a hardness that repels root intrusion and mineral buildup. Run a hand over the smooth, waterproof lining of a Roman cistern, a mix of lime mortar and crushed pottery known as opus signinum. This was not mere plaster, it was ancient concrete, a material science tailored for water. Materials scientists studying these sites note that the Romans and the civilizations before them understood hydraulic chemistry. The opus signinum mixture created a slightly self-healing, crystalline structure that actually grew stronger and more impermeable over time as water interacted with the lime, a process called pozzolanic reaction. They sourced materials with intention. Clay for seals was selected from specific deposits known for their fine, plastic qualities that minimized shrinkage and cracking. Stone for settling basins was often a locally abundant, porous sandstone that allowed a slight amount of seepage to cool the surrounding earth, reducing evaporation loss from the main reservoir. The construction techniques themselves were lessons in distributed strength. In vast underground cisterns, like those beneath Byzantine Constantinople, builders used corbelled roofs where each layer of stone slightly overlapped the one below, creating a soaring, gravity-defying dome without needing a single piece of lumber for support. Distribution outlets, the final point where water entered a home or garden, were often crafted from durable bronze or carefully carved stone, designed to withstand constant use and precise adjustment. But the most vital component was not in the materials alone, it was in the culture that sustained them. Durability was engineered through ritual. Sacred texts and civic legal codes across these civilizations mandated annual cleaning days. Before the seasonal rains or the peak irrigation period, every member of the community with a water share would participate in the cleaning of channels and reservoirs. They would descend into the cisterns, scooping out accumulated silt, which was then used as fertile topsoil in the gardens, completing a perfect nutrient cycle. They would inspect and repair plaster linings, clear debris from tunnel mouths, and ensure the alignment of flow dividers. This work was overseen by guilds of well-diggers and water masters, who passed down not just technical knowledge of tunneling, but the sacred geometry of repair. An apprentice learned how to mix the exact proportion of lime to sand for their region's water, a recipe that might differ from one valley to the next. The perfectly preserved plaster in Istanbul's Basilica cistern, a direct descendant of earlier Roman and Persian techniques, stands as a silent witness to this chain of knowledge. This raises a profound question for our modern moment, one that echoes beyond water. In a culture of disposable infrastructure and planned obsolescence, what have we sacrificed by severing the idea of maintenance as a sacred, ongoing covenant? For these desert societies, maintaining the water system was not a burdensome chore. It was a reaffirmation of their pact with life itself. It was a cyclical ritual that physically connected each generation to the source of their survival. teaching that preservation is an active, participatory verb. The system's longevity was a direct reflection of this cultural value, a daily choice to invest in continuity over convenience. This deep time thinking prepared them for predictable cycles, but the ultimate test was never predictable. It arrived not as a cracked pipe, but as a slow, silent change in the very climate they had so brilliantly adapted to. Rome's legions marched into the deserts of North Africa and the Near East not just as conquerors, but as the world's most sophisticated engineers. They found landscapes already transformed by hidden waterways, and instead of erasing this local genius, they did something profoundly pragmatic. They studied it, measured it, and then scaled it to an imperial level. The Roman Empire's true hydraulic power lay not in pure invention, but in becoming master synthesizers, absorbing and amplifying the aquifer technologies of every culture they encountered. This adaptive approach is a timeless lesson in how innovation often travels, not as a lightning bolt of originality, but as a slow, deliberate current of improvement. Where they found the Persian qanat, they adopted it, calling it by the Latin name cuniculus. In the deserts of Syria and Algeria, Roman surveyors mapped these existing subterranean networks with their famed precision, then extended them with ruthless efficiency to serve new urban centers and military fortresses. The Roman water commissioner Sextus Julius Frontinus, in his detailed writings, captures this administrative mindset. He speaks less of wonder at the water itself and more of the need for meticulous measurement and legal clarity in its distribution. For Rome, water was a public utility, and its management was a matter of state security and civic order. They brought their own formidable skills to the existing template. Their unparalleled surveying ability, using the groma and chorobates, allowed them to plan qanat extensions over vastly greater distances with unwavering gradients. Their architectural prowess then manifested above ground at the point of delivery. They built monumental distribution hubs called casella, elegant stone water towers where a single underground channel would split into multiple lead or ceramic pipes, each flow calibrated to supply a different city quarter, a public bath, or a military barracks. This fusion created hybrid systems of breathtaking scale and reliability. In the Negev desert, one can see the layers of this synthesis. The Nabateans had first mastered the capture of flash floods in clever cisterns and diversion walls. When Rome absorbed the Nabatean kingdom, their engineers did not discard this system. They augmented it, constructing massive reservoirs and linking the local networks to longer aqueducts, ensuring that the water which once sustained a caravan city could now support a permanent Roman administrative center and its expanded population. A powerful example lies in the frontier fortress of Dura Europos on the Euphrates. Here, to sustain a full legion in an arid zone, Roman military engineers constructed an extensive qanat system. They likely utilized local knowledge to locate the aquifer, then applied their regimented labor and precise tunneling techniques to create a reliable water source for thousands of soldiers, turning a remote outpost into a sustainable stronghold. This reflective history poses a compelling question about the nature of progress itself. Does true innovation spring more often from an original, solitary invention, or from the skillful observation, adaptation, and integration of existing ideas? The Roman model suggests the latter. They were the ultimate system integrators, proving that the next great leap forward sometimes requires looking down at the ground beneath your boots, recognizing the genius already at work there, and asking not how to replace it but how to build upon it. Their legacy is a reminder that engineering is as much about cultural intelligence as it is about calculation. Yet, even this mighty synthesis, this empire-wide web of water, would eventually face a test no amount of administrative efficiency could fully control, a slow change whispering through the very climate that fed its sources. The Roman synthesis was a triumph of adaptation, yet across the vast Atlantic, in the sun-baked deserts of the Americas, an identical story of ingenuity was unfolding in perfect isolation. This parallel discovery is perhaps the most powerful testament to a universal human response to aridity. In the blistering valleys of what is now Arizona, the Hohokam culture, whose name means those who have gone, engineered a hydraulic landscape that rivals any in the Old World. Beginning over 1,500 years ago, they transformed the ephemeral flow of the Salt and Gila rivers into the lifeblood of a thriving society. Their signature achievement was a web of irrigation canals stretching over 500 miles, a network so extensive that modern cities like Phoenix and Tucson are built directly atop its ancient channels. Anthropologists point to this as a stunning case of convergent evolution in technology, where similar environmental pressures, even on opposite sides of the planet, yield nearly identical solutions. The Hohokam did not have metal tools or the wheel, yet they moved millions of tons of earth using woven baskets and stone hoes. They constructed clever brush weirs to divert river water into main canals, which then branched into smaller channels feeding individual fields. Their most sophisticated innovation was a system of simple but effective canal gates made from woven mats and wooden stakes, allowing communities to precisely regulate the flow to different plots, a practice requiring the same kind of cooperative water-sharing laws found in Persia and Oman. The water they guided nurtured fields of maize, beans, and cotton, supporting large, permanent villages with ceremonial ball courts and platform mounds. Yet, by around the 15th century, their society faded from the archaeological record, leaving behind their vast, empty canals. Research suggests a combination of factors, including extended droughts and the gradual salinization of their soils from centuries of irrigation, a poignant reminder that even the most brilliant system exists within a delicate ecological balance. Far to the south, in the hyper-arid coastal desert of Peru, the Nazca people faced a challenge even more extreme. Here, rivers are few and rain virtually non-existent, yet they created the famous Nazca lines and sustained a complex society. Their water solution focused on tapping hidden groundwater through remarkable structures known as puquios. These were spiral-shaped, stone-lined shafts that descended to intercept the water table, connected to underground filtration galleries that channeled the water to the surface. The debate among scholars is fierce, with some arguing these puquios functioned much like old-world qanats, using gravity to guide water through subterranean tunnels, while others suggest they were sophisticated wells that accessed deep aquifers. The ongoing mystery of whether they were built in the pre-Columbian era or after Spanish contact only adds to their intrigue. What is clear is that the Nazca, like the Hohokam, imbued water with profound spiritual significance. For them, water was not just a resource, it was a sacred force, and the puquios were likely ceremonial points as much as they were engineering feats, connecting the community to the vital essence beneath the barren ground. Their eventual decline, too, is wrapped in questions of climate shifts and resource management. Seeing these identical principles emerge separately on distant continents forces a humbling and inspiring reflection. What does this tell us about human ingenuity? It suggests that the drive to decipher the secrets of the earth, to collaborate in the face of scarcity, and to build a legacy of sustenance is not the product of any one culture, but a fundamental thread in the human story. From the Qanat to the Aflaj to the puquio, we see the same brilliant mind at work, proving that necessity is not just the mother of invention, but the mother of universal discovery. The ultimate test of any desert water system was not a single dry season, but the slow, crushing weight of a decade without rain. These engineers understood a harsh truth that modern planners are only now relearning: efficiency is meaningless without resilience. Their sixth principle was a masterclass in climate adaptation, designing not for the average year, but for the catastrophic extremes of both drought and deluge. They built redundancy and overcapacity into the very bones of their civilizations, knowing that survival depended on weathering the volatility they could not control. Paleoclimatologists studying the silent archives of tree rings and lakebed sediments have mapped periods of severe aridity that spanned generations, droughts that would break a society reliant on a single source. The brilliance of these ancient systems is how they anticipated this. Consider the Nabatean silt traps. Their dams were not just for holding water, they were designed to manage the destructive sediment carried by flash floods. By constructing a series of settling basins upstream from their main reservoirs, they allowed the heaviest silt to drop out, preserving the storage capacity of their primary tanks for clean water. This was infrastructure thinking in layers, each component serving to protect the next from the environment's fury. The location of Qanat mother wells reveals another strategic layer. These were not dug at random points near an aquifer. They were meticulously placed in geological recharge zones, areas where rainfall, however rare, would naturally percolate and replenish the groundwater most effectively. This ensured that even during a long drought, the mother well had the best possible chance of retaining a trickle, because it was tied to the landscape's own recovery system. Perhaps the most elegant adaptation was the integration of different water sources with different behaviors. This is seen in the practice of sail agriculture or floodwater farming, used from Yemen to the American Southwest. Communities would cultivate fields in broad, dry riverbeds. They did not rely on constant irrigation from a qanat. Instead, they waited for the occasional violent flood. When it came, the floodwaters would surge through the wadi, depositing a layer of nutrient-rich silt and soaking deep into the soil, creating a temporary subsurface reservoir that could sustain crops for an entire growing season. This was a partnership with unpredictability, a way of farming the exception rather than the rule. Social structures adapted alongside the engineering. Legal codes for water distribution were not rigid. They contained clauses for times of scarcity. During a severe drought, the traditional time-based water shares could be adjusted, with the community collectively agreeing to reduce everyone's allotment to preserve the long-term health of the source. This prevented the collapse of the system and the social order it supported. A powerful illustration of this multi-source resilience is the legendary city of Timbuktu. Its existence was made possible by a dual strategy. During the annual flood of the Niger River, water would be channeled into a vast network of canals, filling depressions and nourishing fields. When the river receded and the dry season gripped the land, the city relied on an intricate network of deep, hand-dug wells that tapped into the persistent groundwater fed by the same river miles away. They never put all their faith in one bucket. This holistic approach forces a difficult, reflective question into our present moment. We pride ourselves on hyper-efficient, centralized infrastructure, moving vast quantities of water from point A to point B with minimal loss. But what happens when point A runs dry or when point B is submerged? Their systems were not maximized for peak output, they were optimized for persistence. They were designed for volatility, embracing multiple, sometimes messy, sources and building in the slack, the buffers, and the social flexibility to absorb shock. As we face a future of deepening climate uncertainty, their legacy is a blueprint not for the specific technology, but for the mindset, one that sees resilience not as an added cost, but as the fundamental purpose of design. The true power of their tools lay not in their complexity, but in their perfect marriage to the task. A bronze pick, a woven basket, a goatskin bucket, and a flickering oil lamp. These were the instruments that carved empires from the bedrock. This was innovation born of pure constraint, a philosophy where the absence of machinery forged a deeper, more intimate kind of genius. Every tool was an extension of the body and a reflection of a profound environmental intelligence. Experimental archaeologists have shown that these simple implements, when guided by generations of refined technique, achieved a startling efficiency. One of the most dramatic methods was fire setting. In sections where the tunnel met solid rock, workers would build a hot fire directly against the stone face. Once the rock was superheated, they would douse it with water from their leather buckets. The sudden thermal shock caused the stone to fracture and spall, creating cracks that could then be worked with bronze or iron picks. It was a slow, smoky, and dangerous process, but it turned impossible geology into manageable rubble. Removing that rubble from deep underground required another clever adaptation. At the bottom of a 100-foot mother well, a worker would fill a basket with spoil. The basket was then attached to a rope wound around a large wooden reel or windlass at the surface. This reel was often turned by a donkey or ox walking in a circle, providing the animal power to lift heavy loads from the depths with a simple, leveraged grace. The real challenge, however, was geometry. How do you dig a perfectly straight, gently sloping tunnel for miles through darkness? The process began with the mother well, dug straight down until the celebratory shout echoed up that water had been struck. From that point, surveyors on the surface would mark a straight line toward the distant settlement where the water was needed. Along this line, they would dig a series of vertical access shafts, each one a lifeline for air, light, and removal of debris. To ensure these shafts were perfectly aligned, they used the clearest signal possible, light. A worker at the bottom of one shaft would light a lamp or a smoky fire. A colleague in the previously dug shaft would sight this signal, guiding the diggers to maintain a true course. The horizontal tunnel itself was excavated by specialized teams working in both directions from the bottoms of these shafts, meeting in the middle with astonishing accuracy. Ventilation was passive and brilliant, leveraging the stack effect. The vertical shafts acted like chimneys, cooler air sinking down one shaft while warmer, stale air from the tunnel rose up another, creating a constant, gentle draft that brought oxygen to the men with their picks and lamps far below. For ensuring true verticals in the shafts, they used the simplest tool of all, a weighted plumb line. A stone tied to a string hanging in the still air of the shaft provided an unwavering reference to gravity, a line as true as any modern laser. A powerful testament to this entire system is a modern reconstruction project where a team using only period-appropriate tools successfully excavated a functional Qanat segment. The work was grueling and slow, but it worked, proving the sheer refined effectiveness of the ancient methods. This hands-on intimacy with material and process raises a reflective question for our age of robotic excavators and remote-operated drones. When we insulate ourselves from the grit and resistance of the earth, when we no longer feel the vibration of a pick striking stone or judge a rock's fracture by the sound it makes, what fundamental understanding of our world do we sacrifice? Their toolkit was minimal, but their knowledge was maximal, a deep literacy written in calloused hands and perfected over centuries. This tactile wisdom guided every swing of the pick, but it also shaped the very society that wielded those tools, creating a specialized class of builders whose work was both brutally physical and sacredly intellectual. The cool, steady flow of a Qanat can feel like a miracle of pure intellect, a victory of mind over a merciless landscape. Yet that silent, life-giving stream was born not just from knowledge, but from an immense human effort, a story written in sweat and endurance. To fully understand these ancient aquifers, we must look beyond the engineering diagrams and into the social world that built them, a spectrum of human organization that ranged from sacred communal duty to the brutal realities of coerced labor. The shadow within this brilliance is long, and it asks us to confront a difficult truth about how many of history's grandest wonders came to be. In the tight-knit oasis communities of the Sahara or Oman, the construction and upkeep of a foggara or Aflaj was often a collective endeavor. Every family with a water share had a corresponding responsibility for maintenance, descending into the designated shafts on a rotating schedule to clear silt and repair walls. This was a system of mutual obligation where the technology's survival was inseparable from the social contract. The labor was hard, but it was consensual, a direct investment in one's own family's future and the community's survival. This model tended to produce systems that were modular, adaptable, and deeply sustainable, because those who built them were the very people who depended on them every single day. But scale this need to an empire and the picture often darkens. The grandest projects, the aqueducts and cisterns that served vast capitals or fortified desert frontiers, frequently relied on a different kind of engine, state-driven coercion. Historical records from empires like Assyria or periods of the Roman Empire speak of massive corvée systems, where subjects were required to contribute labor as a form of tax, or the widespread use of enslaved peoples for the most dangerous and grueling tasks. The staggering scale of a 50-kilometer Qanat or the monumental underground cisterns of Constantinople likely required a workforce that was not volunteering but was commanded. The labor was organized with military precision, with workers living in harsh camps along the dig site, their lives dedicated to a project that served a distant ruler's power. This division in labor organization even influenced the technology itself. Communal systems built by the users often featured more localized control points and designs that were easier for a small group to maintain. Imperial projects backed by seemingly limitless manpower could achieve breathtaking, single-minded scale, tunneling through mountains or constructing reservoirs of almost unimaginable volume, prioritizing monumental output over long-term, hands-on maintainability by the common citizen. Within this complex landscape, however, there existed a revered specialist, the master well digger or mukani. These individuals possessed the dangerous, secret knowledge of tunneling, ventilation, and slope calculation. Their expertise was so vital that they often enjoyed a unique social status, sometimes working as free artisans contracted for their skill, even within systems that used slave labor for the bulk of the excavation. Their knowledge was their freedom, a testament that even within harsh systems, intellectual mastery could carve out a space of respect and relative autonomy. A poignant example of this ambiguity surrounds the Basilica cistern in Constantinople. This breathtaking subterranean palace of water, with its forest of recycled classical columns, was built under the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. While the brilliant engineering is celebrated, the historical record is largely silent on the thousands of hands that dug the pit, laid the waterproof plaster, and placed each column. Given the era's practices, it is almost certain that this magnificent feat relied heavily on a mixed workforce of conscripted laborers and enslaved individuals, their names and stories lost to the very water they helped to contain. This history presents us with a reflective and uncomfortable question, one that echoes far beyond ancient water systems. Can we, or should we, separate the sheer technical genius of an invention from the often harsh human systems that enabled its creation? The water that flowed was real, the gardens it grew were beautiful, the cities it sustained were centers of learning and culture. Yet that flow was powered by a current of human effort that spanned the full spectrum from willing cooperation to profound hardship. To acknowledge this complexity is not to diminish the engineering marvel, but to deepen our understanding of it. It reminds us that technology is never neutral. It is always a reflection of the society that builds it, carrying within its channels both the highest aspirations of the human mind and the weight of the human condition. This fuller picture makes the enduring flow of these ancient systems not just a tale of intellect, but a profoundly human story of both triumph and cost. The water that flowed through their cities did more than quench thirst, it traced lines of meaning across the earth. This brings us to a seventh profound principle, where engineering transcended the practical to become an act of sacred geometry. For these civilizations, water was never merely a physical resource. It was a spiritual entity, a living force whose management reflected the very order of the cosmos. The channels they dug and the basins they built were not just infrastructure, they were physical prayers aligning human settlement with celestial patterns and divine principles. Historians of religion point to ancient Mesopotamia, where the earliest temples featured intricate water channels representing the Abzu, the primordial freshwater ocean believed to exist beneath the earth. Bringing this water into the temple complex was an act of connecting the human realm to the divine source of all creation. Similarly, the iconic Persian paradise garden was a geometric echo of paradise itself, its four dividing water channels symbolizing the four rivers of life described in sacred texts. The garden was a microcosm of a perfect, ordered universe made possible by the hidden Qanat. This symbolic thinking dictated urban planning on a grand scale. The layout of water infrastructure often followed sacred geometry, with main channels aligned to astronomical events like solstices or the path of certain stars. A masterful example is found in Machu Picchu. Researchers have shown that the city's primary stone water channel is precisely aligned with key ceremonial structures and engineered to catch the first light of the June solstice. The water's journey from a sacred spring through ritual baths and past the Temple of the Sun was a carefully choreographed pilgrimage in liquid form, integrating spiritual practice with hydrological function. This sacred status directly influenced social hierarchy and daily life. The purest, freshest water from the source was almost always reserved for temples and royal palaces first, a literal embodiment of divine favor and earthly power. From there, it would flow to public fountains and baths, which became the vibrant centers of community life. These were not mere utilities, they were stages for social ritual. The Roman bath complex, with its sequence of pools from cold to hot, mirrored a philosophical and physical journey. In Islamic cities, the public fountain, or sabil, provided drinking water for all and was often the most beautifully adorned structure on a street, a charitable act that blended civic duty with spiritual merit. This worldview raises a challenging, reflective question for our modern sensibility. We have largely stripped water of its sacred dimension, treating it as a commodity, a chemical formula, a line item on a utility bill. What might we regain if we began to see water not just as a resource to be managed, but as a sacred trust that connects us to each other and to the natural world? Their engineering was an act of both practical and cosmic harmony, reminding us that the most enduring systems are those that nourish the spirit as deeply as they nourish the soil. This holistic vision, however, would face its ultimate trial not from a lack of water, but from a slow, silent shift in the very climate that fed their genius. The channels were more than pipes, they were the city's nervous system. Each trickle and current carried a constant stream of data about a world the inhabitants could not see. The flow rate, the water's clarity, even its subtle temperature, these were not random qualities. They were vital signals from the distant mountains and the hidden aquifer. A sudden slowdown in a main Qanat channel was not just an inconvenience, it was an urgent message. It could mean a collapse in the tunnel far upstream, a silt blockage that needed immediate clearing, or worse, a signal that the mother well's water table was dropping, the first whisper of a prolonged drought in the distant recharge zone. This information network operated in real time, passively and perpetually, without a single sensor beyond human observation. The system's caretakers, the water masters, were its interpreters. By walking the channels daily, they could diagnose problems from miles away. Murky water flowing into a settling basin indicated a recent flash flood upstream, carrying sediment, a signal to prepare the spillways. Water arriving unusually cool might suggest a shift in the underground source, perhaps a new fracture tapped deeper into the aquifer. This was ancient analog intelligence, a hydrological internet where the medium itself was the message. The data stream extended into the social realm. The meticulously scheduled water shares measured by time at a distribution basin were more than a fair way to divide a resource. They were a living, flowing contract. The schedule itself encoded complex social agreements about land ownership, inheritance, and civic responsibility. If a farmer's appointed time came and the water did not arrive, it was not just a personal loss, it was a system-wide alert, a breach in the communal covenant that demanded investigation and repair. The very sound of water became a tool for communication. In the narrow stone aqueducts of a Roman city, the change in the water's murmur as it poured from a high channel into a reservoir could indicate the reservoir's fill level to a trained ear. In some oasis communities, the specific sound of water flowing into one's own irrigation channel, triggered by the opening of a shared gate, was the auditory signal that your time had begun, a natural alarm clock governed by gravity and agreement. A masterful integration of this concept is the clepsydra, or water clock, used from Babylon to Greece. These were not just timekeeping devices, they were the physical interface between measured time and allocated water. In the Hellenistic world, especially in places like Ptolemaic Egypt, these clocks were used to regulate the complex irrigation schedules of vast agricultural districts. A designated official would watch the steady drip from one vessel to another, and at the precise moment the water level reached a mark, he would signal for a canal gate to be opened or closed. The clock translated the relentless, uniform flow of time into the managed, life-giving flow of water, creating a feedback loop where time measured resource, and resource allocation measured the community's rhythm. This entire approach presents a quiet challenge to our modern ideals of a smart city. We now deploy networks of electronic sensors, digital meters, and centralized control rooms to monitor water pressure, detect leaks, and manage consumption. Their system achieved a similar goal of responsiveness and data collection, but it was woven into the fabric of daily life and the physical environment itself. It asked every user to be a participant observer, attuned to the subtle language of the flow. So we might reflect, in our rush to make infrastructure intelligent with silicon and software, have we made it less intelligible to the people it serves? Their network required no external power, generated no e-waste, and made the health of the system legible to anyone who learned to listen to the water's story. It was a technology that communicated with its community, not just to it. That single droplet, guided from a hidden aquifer to a sun-baked field, carried more than just life. It carried value. The true power of these ancient waterways was not merely survival, but their ability to generate wealth on a staggering scale, transforming water from a basic need into the world's first and most vital form of capital. This is the eighth principle, the economy of water, where engineering an aquifer directly engineered an empire's treasury. To understand it, follow the journey of one such drop. It emerges from a Qanat outlet in the mir-ab oasis of Central Asia, channeled into a precisely timed irrigation furrow. There, it soaks into the root of a cotton plant. That plant, nurtured by 1,000 other drops, grows, flowers, and produces a ball of white fiber. That fiber is harvested, spun into thread, and woven into a bolt of fine cloth. This cloth is then loaded onto a camel, traveling the Silk Road to be sold in a distant market for silver. The silver returns to the empire, where a portion is collected as tax, funding a new regiment of cavalry or the construction of a grand library. Every step of this chain, from field to fortress, began with that single command of water. Economic historians point to a direct, transformative sequence. Reliable, engineered irrigation created predictable agricultural surpluses for the first time in arid regions. This surplus meant that not everyone had to farm to eat. It freed a portion of the population to specialize, Some became potters, metalworkers, or scribes. Others became merchants and soldiers. This specialization fueled urbanization, the growth of market towns and administrative centers, all clustered around the water source that made their existence possible. Water was the primary asset upon which all other production was built. The state, recognizing this, moved swiftly to monetize the flow. This was achieved through sophisticated systems of taxation and water rights. Farmers paid a water tax, often a percentage of their crop yield, directly to the imperial coffers. In some systems, the rights to specific water time slots became valuable, tradable property, bought and sold like shares in a company. The Sasanian Empire of Persia provides a masterful case study. Their rulers invested heavily in state-sponsored qanat construction, viewing them not as public works but as economic engines. By bringing vast new tracts of desert under cultivation, they dramatically increased the land's taxable output. This revenue funded their military campaigns against the Byzantine Empire and built magnificent cities like Ctesiphon. Historians often call this period the Golden Age of Persian irrigation, where hydrological investment directly purchased imperial power. The specific crops made viable tell their own story of economic ambition. In Persia, qanat water enabled the cultivation of sugarcane, a lucrative cash crop that demanded constant moisture. In the Negev desert, the Nabateans and later Byzantine monks used runoff farming and cisterns to grow olive trees, producing oil for export across the Mediterranean. In the oases of the Sahara, it was the date palm, its fruit a dense, transportable source of calories that became a staple of trans-Saharan trade. Each of these was not just food, it was a commodity, a product that could be stored, shipped, and sold to generate wealth far beyond the local community. This system created a self-reinforcing cycle. Water investment increased agricultural output, which increased tax revenue, which funded more water investment and military protection for trade routes, which further increased agricultural wealth. The empire grew richer and more stable with every new channel dug. This historical reality forces a reflective and urgent question into our present. Today, we largely treat water as a public utility, a cost center to be managed. What if we reframed it, as these ancient empires did, as foundational economic infrastructure, the very bedrock of national prosperity and security? Their genius was seeing the aqueduct not as a plumbing line, but as a direct pipeline to the treasury, understanding that the most valuable thing they could build was not a palace, but the hidden network that made the palace's wealth possible. This economic transformation, however, created its own profound tensions, as the control of such a vital asset inevitably shaped the balance of power within the society it enriched. The silent flow of a qanat can feel eternal, but the ruins scattered across the world's deserts tell a different story. For every Petra that thrived, there is a silent valley where the water stopped, the gardens turned to dust, and the community dispersed. The collapse of these systems holds warnings as vital as their success, revealing that even the most brilliant engineering exists within a fragile pact between society and environment. Expert thinkers like Joseph Tainter point to a recurring pattern, where the very complexity that sustains a civilization can become its burden, especially when the cost of maintaining intricate systems outweighs the benefits they provide. This was not a single failure, but a cascade. One primary cause was the relentless draw on the source itself. A network of qanats, while sustainable in balance, could collectively lower a regional water table over centuries. As the aquifer dropped, the mother wells ran dry, and the entire subterranean network, a masterpiece of human effort, became a dry skeleton in the earth. The Garamontes of the Sahara, who built a kingdom on foggaras in what is now Libya, faced this exact fate. Their sophisticated system allowed them to farm the desert for centuries, but research suggests they eventually extracted more water than the distant recharge zones could replenish. The aquifer slowly retreated beyond the reach of their deepest tunnels, and their green settlements were gradually reclaimed by the sands, leaving behind their silent, stone-lined shafts as monuments to a lost balance. Another silent killer was salinization, a lesson written in the very soil of ancient Mesopotamia. Here, engineers had mastered irrigation from the great rivers, turning the land between the Tigris and Euphrates into a fertile breadbasket. Yet, without adequate natural drainage to flush salts from the soil, each application of water left behind a tiny residue of mineral. Over generations, this salt accumulated, poisoning the fields and steadily reducing crop yields. The solution would have required a massive investment in drainage canals, a complex and costly maintenance challenge that, according to some analyses, the later empires could not or would not meet. The land that had given rise to cities slowly whitened with salt, a testament to how a solution for one era can become the problem for the next. Collapse often arrived through social, not hydrological, fracture. The communal management of a Aflaj or foggara required stability, trust, and a shared commitment to upkeep, conquest, internal conflict, or a devastating outbreak of illness could shatter that social contract. If a plague reduced the population, there might not be enough hands to conduct the annual cleaning of miles of tunnels. If a new ruler imposed different taxes or priorities, the local water masters might be displaced and the precise knowledge of maintenance schedules lost. The system would then fail not from a lack of water, but from a break in the human chain that sustained it. Siltation from environmental mismanagement upstream could also deliver a slow death. If hillsides were deforested for fuel or farmland, the soil lost its anchor. When the rains came, they washed unprecedented amounts of silt into reservoirs and settling basins, filling them far faster than communities could dredge. A system designed to last centuries could be rendered useless in a generation by ecological changes its builders never anticipated. These historical echoes resonate with an unsettling clarity today. Consider the vast Ogallala Aquifer beneath the American Great Plains, a fossil water reserve that feeds much of the nation's agriculture. We are extracting it at a rate far beyond its natural recharge, a practice that mirrors the final, unsustainable chapters of the Garamontes. Our own fields face salinization challenges, and the social will to maintain aging, complex water infrastructure is often a subject of intense debate. The reflective question these ancient failures press upon us is urgent. Are we, in our reliance on powerful pumps and deep wells, repeating the same cycle of drawdown and depletion, just on a planetary scale? Their ruins are not just relics, they are prototypes of collapse, showing us the endpoints of paths we are still walking. To study them is to gain a precious map of the cliffs ahead, written in the dust of civilizations who believed their water would never run out. The word canal sounds modern, but its ancient echo is qanat. This is more than linguistic trivia, it is a direct line back to the desert engineers. Their legacy is not only carved in stone, but woven into the very fabric of our language and law, a testament to how deeply a society's rules are shaped by its relationship with water. The terminology itself is a map of diffusion. From the Persian qanat, the word traveled into Arabic and from there, carried by Islamic scholarship and engineering, into North Africa as the foggara. It crossed the Mediterranean with the Moors into Spain, becoming the acequia, a term still used today across the American Southwest for community irrigation ditches. In Oman, the word Aflaj is not just a historical term, it is a living category in the nation's legal code, defining an entire class of protected cultural heritage. These words are fossils of a forgotten intelligence, preserving in everyday speech the memory of a technology that once meant the difference between life and dust. This linguistic legacy is merely the surface ripple of a much deeper current, the enduring architecture of water law. The need to govern a shared, vital resource forced these civilizations to invent some of humanity's first and most sophisticated systems of equitable distribution and conflict resolution. The famous Code of Hammurabi, etched in Babylon nearly 4,000 years ago, contains specific clauses governing irrigation. It held farmers financially responsible if their negligence flooded a neighbor's field, establishing an early principle of liability and care for communal infrastructure. Centuries later, in the Mozabite communities of the Sahara, the Kitab al-Qanon, or Book of Law, meticulously detailed every aspect of foggara management, from the inheritance of water shares to the precise schedule of tunnel maintenance. These were not suggestions, they were binding social contracts that prioritized the system's longevity over any individual's short-term gain. The principles they established feel strikingly modern. The doctrine of prior appropriation, often summarized as first in time, first in right, a cornerstone of water law in the western United States, finds its ancient parallel in desert societies where the first to dig a productive well or qanat earned a senior share. More profound was the principle of equity, the understanding that all members of the community had a fundamental right to a basic sustenance of water, a concept that tempered pure ownership with a social obligation. To adjudicate these complex rules, specialized roles emerged. The Qadi, or Islamic judge, often became an expert in water disputes, his rulings based on a blend of religious law and customary practice. Perhaps the most vivid living example of this unbroken tradition meets every Thursday outside the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain. Here, the Tribunal de los Aguas, the water court, convenes in public. 8 elected farmers representing the major irrigation canals settle disputes by oral testimony in a direct lineage that scholars trace back through Islamic and Roman administrative practice. They have met like this for over 1,000 years, a weekly performance of justice that turns water management into a visible, communal ritual. This persistent legacy invites a reflective question that reaches far beyond history. When we debate modern issues like riparian rights, groundwater extraction limits, or the management of a shared aquifer that crosses national borders, are we unknowingly speaking in the shadow of these ancient desert judges? Our very concept of a resource right, of communal governance versus private ownership, and of equitable access was forged in the crucible of absolute scarcity. Their systems proved that technology alone is fragile. It is the framework of agreement around it that gives it enduring life. The water that flowed through their tunnels carried not just sustenance, but the seeds of legal philosophy, teaching that the most vital engineering is often the invisible architecture of fair play and mutual responsibility. That architecture, however, faced its ultimate test not in a court, but under the open sky, when the climate itself began to shift in ways their meticulous laws could not legislate. A tree does not pump water to its highest leaves, it coaxes it upward through capillary action and gentle suction. This quiet genius of the living world was the unspoken textbook for the ancient hydrologist. Their 9th principle was a masterclass in biomimicry long before the word existed. A profound emulation of nature's own hydrological systems where sustainability was not a goal, but an inherent outcome of the design. Think of a single raindrop hitting the broad leaf of a fig tree. It does not splash away randomly, it is channeled along the leaf's veins toward the stem, directed with perfect efficiency. This same principle of guided convergence is what you see in the network of small channels on a hillside, gathering sporadic runoff into a single, managed stream. Their technology was less an invention and more a translation, decoding the patterns that the desert itself used to manage its rare and precious moisture. Modern biomimicry pioneer Janine Benyus defines this approach as innovation inspired by nature, and the ancient aquifer systems are perhaps its purest historical expression. They did not fight the physics of water. They observed how water behaved in an untouched landscape and then built infrastructure that invited it to behave the same way, just to human advantage. Consider the Qanat network sprawling beneath the earth. Its structure is not a rigid grid, but a branching, organic web, with a main tunnel like a taproot and smaller feeder channels spreading out like root hairs, all seeking the moisture held in the geological substrate. This mirroring of a root system allowed them to maximize contact with the water-bearing layer, harvesting it gently rather than mining it violently. Their settling basins were direct copies of the quiet pools in a natural streambed. In a wild canyon, flowing water slows in a broad area, allowing suspended silt to fall to the bottom before the clearer water continues downstream. The ancient engineers simply recreated these pools in stone at strategic points in their channels, letting gravity and patience do the work of purification without any need for filters or chemicals. Even their filtration methods were a mimicry of the earth itself. The layered, graded materials they placed in infiltration galleries, coarse gravel followed by fine sand, perfectly replicated the natural filtration of groundwater as it percolates down through soil strata. They were not building a treatment plant, they were constructing an artificial slice of the vadose zone, the very layer of earth that has been cleaning water for eons. This emulation extended to climate control. In regions of southern Africa and Australia, researchers have noted how some ancient ventilation shafts for underground chambers bear a striking resemblance to the structure of termite mounds. These mounds maintain a remarkably constant internal temperature through a complex system of chimneys and tunnels that promote passive airflow. It is compelling to consider whether early engineers, observing the resilience of these structures in harsh climates, adapted similar principles to keep the air fresh and cool in their own deep tunnels and storage spaces. A beautiful illustration of this natural dialogue is the shape of many ancient cisterns and underground reservoirs. They were often carved or built in rounded, cavern-like forms, echoing the arches of a natural grotto. This was not merely for aesthetic reasons. The arched or domed shape is nature's own engineering for withstanding the immense pressure of the surrounding earth, distributing force evenly. Furthermore, the thick walls and underground placement mimic the insulating properties of a cave, keeping stored water remarkably cool through even the hottest seasons, reducing loss to evaporation. This entire philosophy presents a humbling, reflective question for our age of synthetic materials and energy-intensive solutions. We invest billions in research and development for new technologies, yet often overlook the fact that the natural world around us is a living library of solutions refined over billions of years. The leaf, the root system, the watershed, the termite mound, all represent perfected models of efficiency, resilience, and circular resource use. Their engineering was not a monologue of human dominance, but a careful dialogue with nature, a process of asking how the environment already solved the problem, and then finding a way to partner with that existing logic. This deep listening allowed them to build systems that were not just sustainable, but regenerative, woven into the ecological fabric rather than imposed upon it. Yet, this brilliant partnership with nature's patterns faced a final, formidable test, one that moved beyond observation and into the realm of collective memory and identity, where water became the story a civilization told about itself. The diagram on the engineer's screen in Tucson is not for a new polymer or a solar-powered pump. It is a cross-section of a 3,000-year-old Persian qanat, being studied as a blueprint for solving Arizona's own plummeting groundwater levels. This is not nostalgia, it is a strategic revival, a growing global recognition that the most advanced solution for 21st century water scarcity might be a technology perfected millennia ago. Across the world, a powerful movement is underway, one that treats ancient hydrological systems not as museum pieces, but as a vital, living library of sustainable design. This is the practical application of traditional ecological knowledge, a formal term for the deep, place-based wisdom that these desert civilizations encoded in their stone and social codes. Organizations like the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization now actively promote the restoration of qanats and Aflaj, recognizing them as resilient, low-energy systems perfectly suited for a climate-challenged future. The modern applications are both technical and profoundly social. Take the principle of the infiltration gallery, the carefully placed tunnel within a water-bearing stratum. Today, this concept is being reborn as managed aquifer recharge, or MRR. In regions like California and India, engineers are constructing modern versions of these galleries, not to extract water but to put it back. During periods of heavy rain or flood, surplus water is diverted into spreading basins or injected into specially designed wells, where it percolates down through natural filtration layers to replenish exhausted aquifers. It is the ancient logic of cultivating groundwater, updated with hydrological modeling but guided by the same core principle: work with the Earth's natural storage capacity. The social models are being revived with equal urgency. The intricate, time-based water sharing and communal maintenance rules of the Aflaj and foggara are providing a template for modern water user associations in arid regions from Latin America to Central Asia. These associations move beyond simple metering, reinstating the idea that water rights come with direct responsibilities for upkeep, fostering a sense of collective ownership and vigilance that no distant utility can replicate. In Oman, the government supports the cleaning and restoration of ancient Aflaj, integrating them with modern drip irrigation lines. This hybrid approach uses the ancient, gravity-fed channel as the main artery and efficient modern drip tape as the capillaries, maximizing every drop while honoring the original social infrastructure that made the system endure. Even the tools of discovery are a fusion of old and new. Satellite imagery and drone surveys are now used to trace the faint, linear signatures of long-buried qanat lines across deserts from Syria to China, revealing lost networks that can be mapped and sometimes revived. These technologies allow us to see what the ancient surveyors once intuited, reading the landscape from above to find what lies hidden below. A powerful, large-scale example of this integrated revival is seen in Africa's Great Green Wall initiative. This ambitious project to halt desertification across the Sahel does not rely solely on planting trees. It actively incorporates traditional zai pits, small planting basins that harvest rainwater, and stone contour lines that mimic ancient runoff farming techniques to capture scarce moisture and restore soil. It is a massive, modern endeavor built upon a foundation of ancient, localized wisdom. This global rediscovery forces a fundamental shift in perspective. We have spent over a century mastering the art of moving water with immense force over great distances using colossal amounts of energy. The ancient model asks us to master the opposite, the art of gentle guidance, of patient storage, and of social coordination. Their toolkit offers proven strategies for resilience, for living within the means of a local water cycle rather than constantly seeking to transcend it. The reflective question this revival poses is both practical and philosophical. In our pursuit of innovation, have we been overlooking a vault of already perfected, time-tested solutions? The past, it seems, does not just offer history, it offers a working prototype for a sustainable future, one where the answers to our most pressing crises may have been quietly flowing beneath our feet all along. A faint line of shallow depression stretches across the sun-bleached valley, a pattern so subtle it is almost invisible. To the untrained eye, it is nothing but a trick of the light. But to the archaeologist kneeling in the dust, it is the first line of a long-lost story, the ghostly signature of a buried qanat. This is where the detective work begins, a meticulous process of listening to a landscape that has been silent for centuries. The modern search for these hidden water worlds relies on an interdisciplinary toolkit, blending cutting-edge technology with the timeless skills of observation. The initial clue often comes from above via satellite imagery and drone photography. Specialists analyze historical aerial photographs and high-resolution satellite data, searching for those linear patterns of depressions that betray the presence of collapsed access shafts. Even more revealing is thermal imaging. At dawn, the stone and earth covering a buried tunnel cools at a different rate than the surrounding ground, sometimes revealing its path as a faint, cooler line snaking across the desert floor. Once a promising site is identified, the investigation moves closer to the earth. Ground-penetrating radar is gently pushed across the surface, sending pulses into the ground and reading the echoes. It can map the void of a tunnel or the disturbed fill of a shaft without ever breaking the soil, creating a sonogram of the subterranean past. Dr. Susan Alcock, an archaeologist who has surveyed ancient hydraulic landscapes, notes the profound caution required. The goal is to map, not to disturb. A single misstep could collapse a tunnel that has stood for 2,000 years, destroying the very history we seek to understand. If the subsurface maps suggest an intact structure, the team may carefully excavate one of the access shafts. This is delicate, painstaking work. Each basket of soil is meticulously sifted, not for treasure but for context. The layers of sediment tell a tale of use and abandonment. A layer of clean gravel might indicate the original construction backfill, while a thick band of silt higher up tells of the final, slow choking of the channel before it was finally left to the desert. The most thrilling and dangerous phase is the physical exploration of an intact tunnel. Specialists, often with backgrounds in caving or mine rescue, descend into the darkness. Their headlamps illuminate walls marked by the precise, rhythmic scars of bronze picks, a direct connection to the workers of a forgotten age. They might find a discarded leather sandal, a broken oil lamp, or a tally mark etched into the wall, a silent message from a mukani keeping count of his progress. These are not grand artifacts, but intimate fragments of the labor that built an empire. This scientific process is powerfully guided by another, more human source, living memory. Place names are often ancient data. A field known locally as the Mother of Water, or a hill called the Place of the Well, can lead researchers straight to a lost system. Elders in Oasis communities may recount stories passed down for generations, tales of a great underground river that once flowed to their grandparents' gardens. These oral histories are not mere legend. They are often remarkably accurate geospatial guides, preserving a cognitive map of the landscape long after the physical evidence has faded. A stunning example of this fusion of technology and tradition is the recent work around Petra. Using drone-mounted lidar, which lasers the ground to create a hyper-detailed three-dimensional map, researchers penetrated the dense scrub covering the plateau above the city. The resulting models stripped away the vegetation, revealing an incredibly complex and vast network of terraces, dams, and channels designed to capture every drop of rainfall. This discovery rewrote the narrative of Nabatean hydrology, showing their system was even more extensive and sophisticated than previously believed. It forces us to wonder, with a sense of thrilling possibility, what other vast, invisible networks of ancient engineering still lie hidden beneath the world's deserts, waiting for the right combination of technology, tradition, and patient curiosity to tell their story. Each of these discoveries is more than a technical revelation. It is a recovered chapter in the human saga of resilience, a reminder that the past is not always behind us, but often resting just beneath our feet. The final test of their engineering was not technical, but moral. Beneath the genius of their aqueducts lies a profound and unsettling question. Were these civilizations living in harmony with their hidden rivers, or were they, like us, cleverly mining a resource they could not replace? This is the 10th principle, the ethics of extraction, a timeless tension between sustainability and exploitation that forces us to see their achievements in a more complex, critical light. Environmental historians engage in a spirited debate on this very point. On one side, the argument for inherent sustainability is strong. The slow, gravity-fed flow of a qanat is self-regulating. It cannot extract water faster than the aquifer naturally recharges. The system's design married supply with demand in a gentle equilibrium. Furthermore, the communal management structure, with its shared labor and transparent water shares, created powerful cultural checks and balances. Taboos and religious edicts often forbade the wasteful use of water, embedding conservation directly into the social and spiritual fabric. A community that had to manually clean the tunnels every year understood the direct cost of depletion, fostering a deep, practical ethic of care. The proof is in the enduring flow. Some Iranian qanats have delivered water continuously for well over 2 millennia, a testament to a system designed for permanence. Yet there is a counter-narrative, one that reveals a shadow side to this hydraulic brilliance. The distinction lies in the type of water being tapped. Many systems harvested renewable water, like seasonal flood runoff or shallow groundwater actively recharged by annual rains. This was a partnership with the active water cycle. However, some evidence points to the mining of fossil water, ancient aquifers sealed deep underground that receive little to no modern recharge. The Garamontes of the Sahara, with their extensive foggara networks, may have crossed this line. Their sophisticated engineering allowed them to tap a vast subterranean lake, a treasure chest of ancient water. For centuries, it made the desert bloom. But research suggests they were withdrawing this fossil water faster than any negligible recharge could replace it. They were not harvesting a crop, they were emptying a buried vault. The result was a slow, inevitable retreat of the water table. Their tunnels ran dry, their gardens withered, and their civilization receded back into the sands, leaving behind a powerful cautionary tale written in stone and dust. This contrast becomes stark when comparing timelines. Place the millennia-long operation of a Persian qanat next to the water history of the classic Maya. The Maya of the Yucatan Peninsula relied on elaborate systems of reservoirs to capture rainfall, but their growing urban populations and prolonged droughts likely pushed demand beyond what their carefully managed surface stores could provide. Their engineered solutions, while brilliant, may have been outpaced by environmental change and population pressure, contributing to a period of profound societal reorganization. This history holds up a mirror to our own moment, and the reflection is challenging. We possess infinitely more powerful tools for extraction, capable of draining aquifers in decades that took millennia to form. Our cultural checks and balances, however, are often weaker, prioritizing short-term economic gain over intergenerational equity. So where exactly is the line between wise stewardship and clever exploitation? The ancient answer seems to lie in the source and the society. Stewardship taps into renewable cycles with humility and shared oversight. Exploitation treats a finite reserve as an inexhaustible commodity, divorcing the act of use from the responsibility for its future. Their legacy, in all its complexity, challenges us to audit our own projects not just for their engineering prowess, but for their ethical geometry. Are we building systems that our grandchildren's grandchildren will thank us for, or are we merely perfecting the art of borrowing from their future to pay for our present? The silence of a buried Garamantian foggara suggests that no amount of technical brilliance can forever outrun the arithmetic of a shrinking well. The most graceful line in the desert was not drawn by an artist but by a surveyor. It is the gentle, unbroken arc of a stone aqueduct against a stark cliff face, the perfect circle of a wellhead repeated like a stanza of poetry across an empty plain, the mirror-still surface of a reservoir holding the entire sky in a place of thirst. This is the aesthetics of the arid, a profound truth these civilizations understood. In a world defined by scarcity, beauty was not a luxury, it was a dimension of functionality. A well-engineered system, one that moved water with minimal loss and maximal harmony, could not help but be elegant. The utility and the beauty were two sides of the same ceramic tile. Art historians see this fusion most clearly in the Islamic Paradise Garden, a geometric masterpiece made possible by the hidden Qanat. The four water channels dividing the garden were not merely irrigation lines. They represented the four rivers of paradise described in sacred texts, a cosmological map rendered in water and stone. The precise symmetry, the mathematical harmony of the layout, was an expression of a spiritual ideal: order, balance, and abundance, all flowing from a practical command of hydrology. This integration was architectural. Water was not hidden in pipes but celebrated in its journey. It danced in public fountains, their intricate carvings ensuring the water broke into a cooling, musical spray. It whispered through carved stone gargoyles and spouts, each one a small sculpture where form followed the fluid dynamics of the pour. Even the humble access shafts of a qanat, rising from the earth at regular intervals, created a rhythmic, almost musical pattern across the landscape, a kind of land art that marked the hidden pulse of the water below. The end points of these systems were sanctuaries of sensory experience. Consider the Pool of Siloam in ancient Jerusalem, a vast, stepped reservoir fed by the city's ingenious tunnel. It was not a grim concrete tank, but a monumental public space, a place for gathering, for ritual purification, and simply for witnessing the miracle of abundant water in a dry land. In Petra, the so-called baths of Aphrodite channeled water into a secluded, natural grotto, transforming a functional spring into a cool, verdant retreat that engaged sight, sound, and touch. The craftsmanship devoted to water's touchpoints was extraordinary. Distribution markers where water shares were measured were often inscribed with beautiful calligraphy, turning a legal device into a public monument. The stone linings of cisterns were finished with smooth, waterproof plaster that felt cool and perfect to the hand, and the vaulted ceilings of underground reservoirs, like the Basilica cistern in Istanbul, were supported by forests of recycled classical columns, creating a sublime, cavernous space that felt more like a sacred temple than a utility. This attention to the aesthetic experience of infrastructure invites a reflective question that resonates deeply today. In our modern world, we often relegate water management to the realm of the purely functional, to ugly pipes, bland treatment plants, and invisible grids. But what if we considered that focusing on the beauty, the serenity, and the communal joy of water infrastructure could lead to systems that are more cherished, more thoughtfully maintained, and ultimately more sustainable? For these ancient engineers, the cool quiet of a cistern, the pleasing symmetry of a channel, and the cheerful sound of a fountain were not afterthoughts. They were signals that the system was working in harmony with both human nature and the natural world. They built for survival, but in doing so with such grace, they created landscapes of profound and enduring beauty, proving that when life depends on something, it is worth making it sing. The water's quiet journey through the dark stone is the final, eloquent teacher. After tracing the brilliance of their tools and the scale of their ambition, we arrive at the core truth that made it all possible. These civilizations did not thrive by conquering the desert, but by listening to it. Their ultimate engineering principle was not force, but a profound humility, a recognition of absolute interdependence. They understood that their survival was woven into the fabric of the water cycle, the stability of their community, and the needs of generations yet unborn. This is the masterclass they left behind, a philosophy of sustainable coexistence written in water and stone. Modern farmer and philosopher Wendell Berry articulates a sentiment that would have been deeply familiar to a Nabatean water master or a Persian mir-ab. He writes that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. This ancient wisdom of limits and legacy was the bedrock of their success. It manifested in every aspect of their systems, from the technology to the social code. Their interdependence was threefold. First, between people and place. They invested not in generic solutions, but in deep local knowledge. The specific flight of a bird, the exact porosity of a gravel bed, the unique rhythm of their valley's floods. Their technology was hyper-localized, a bespoke suit tailored to the exact measurements of their environment. Second, interdependence flowed between individual and community. A qanat could not be dug by one person nor maintained by one family. It required a shared vision and a binding social contract. The intricate water laws and rotating maintenance duties were not bureaucratic hassles. They were the ligaments that held the societal body together, ensuring that individual benefit was inextricably linked to communal responsibility. No one could prosper unless the system prospered, and the system required everyone's care. Third, and perhaps most challenging for us to grasp, was their interdependence with time. They designed for the long arc. A project that would take decades to complete was an investment in a future they might never see, a gift to their grandchildren. Maintenance was not an inconvenient cost, but a sacred, cyclical ritual that connected each generation to the source of its life. This long-term thinking stands in stark contrast to the often brittle, high-energy solutions of our industrial age. We build massive dams and pipelines that move water thousands of miles, systems that demand constant, immense inputs of energy and capital. When they fail, the collapse is catastrophic. Their systems were low energy, decentralized, and resilient. When one access shaft of a qanat clogged, the rest of the network continued to flow. Their design accepted the possibility of partial failure without total collapse. This holistic triumph, where culture, technology, and ecology were not separate departments but facets of a single, living strategy, is their enduring lesson. It challenges our modern compartmentalization, where engineers design, politicians allocate funds, and communities are merely end users. For them, these roles were fluid and unified. The engineer understood the social needs, the elder understood the engineering constraints, and the farmer participated in both. This brings us to a reflective question that reaches beyond our planet. As we set our sights on colonizing other worlds, on making deserts like Mars habitable, what blueprint will we carry? Will we export the industrial hubris of conquest, seeking to blast and terraform and force a new world to fit our old patterns? Or will we embody the humble, integrated wisdom of the ancient water masters? Will we first become astute students of the Martian dust, learning its rhythms, understanding its hidden potentials, and designing systems that work in gentle partnership with its alien geology? The legacy of Petra, of Persepolis, of the Saharan foggara, suggests that our survival anywhere, whether in an earthly desert or on a distant, barren plain, depends less on the power of our tools and more on the depth of our humility, our willingness to see ourselves not as rulers of a landscape, but as participating members within it. Their silent, flowing channels ask us to remember that the most advanced system is not the one that exerts the most control, but the one that best understands its place in the web. The whispering tunnels of Persian qanats and the flood-capturing dams of Petra are more than archaeological wonders. They are a testament to a shared human truth. When faced with the ultimate constraint of thirst, the mind finds its most creative form. Our journey has traced 10 timeless principles etched not in textbooks, but in the very earth, from reading the landscape's hidden language to building a sacred covenant with the future. Across continents and cultures, from the Aflaj of Oman to the puquios of Peru, we see the same brilliant patterns emerge independently, a global chorus of ingenuity singing the same song of survival. This was not primitive trial and error. It was high engineering of the most elegant kind, a sophisticated triad of technical mastery, deep ecological wisdom, and unbreakable social contract. They understood that a channel without a community to care for it is just a ditch, and a law without respect for the aquifer it governs is just words on a page. Today, as aquifers plummet and rivers run dry, their legacy is no longer just a historical curiosity. It is an urgent, living manual. Their principles of gentle guidance over forceful extraction, of communal stewardship over private hoarding, and of designing for resilience over mere efficiency, offer a compass for a parched future. They prove that sustainability is not a modern invention, but an ancient, proven craft. Let this exploration stand as a reminder that some of the most advanced blueprints for our survival are not waiting in a lab of the future, but are already written in the sand and stone beneath our feet. Their silent, flowing wisdom asks us one final, reflective question. In our search for solutions to the great challenges of our age, from water scarcity to social fracture, how much further ahead might we be if we learned to listen as they did to the profound intelligence of the past? If this dive into ancient ingenuity resonated with you, we would love to hear your perspective. What modern problem do you believe could be solved by applying an ancient principle like those we explored today? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to join us as we continue to unearth the profound, practical lessons history holds for our collective journey forward.